This video, I'm going to be reviewing the Pioneer Mini Ductless Split that you see behind me. This is a long-term review. I've had this mini split installed since July 2020. So we've had it for about 8 months, and here in New Hampshire in July and August, it can get up to about 100 degrees or more with a lot of humidity. And in the wintertime, we have had some sub-zero days. So at this point, we have used this mini split in extreme heat and extreme cold. So I'm going to talk about the cost, the installation, how efficient it is, how well it works in both heating and cooling situations, and overall my impressions of the unit. Because the Mitsubishi and Fujitsu mini ductless split systems, which are kind of the industry standard, are about 2 to 3 times more expensive than this Pioneer unit. You can get these units, depending on the specs, for under $1,000, which is a great price, but obviously not really worth spending if the unit doesn't work well or if it's just gonna conk out after a few months of use. So the question is it worth buying the cheaper unit, or should you buy once and cry once with the more expensive Mitsubishis? So the specs on this particular mini split are, it is a 21.5 SEER rated for cooling, and the SEER rating is basically how efficient a cooling unit works. Anything over 20 is considered very efficient, and it is a 12,000 BTU unit, or 1 ton in the HVAC language, and it is cooling and heating a 450 square foot bedroom, our master bedroom. So it is cooling and heating a very large room. And in the summertime, this room gets extremely hot because the way the house is positioned, the sun rises in the front right corner of the house and goes up over the house and is just pointing straight down at this room all day, and even as the sun sets, it's still facing this room. So this room is getting a ton of direct sunlight, and it gets extremely hot in this bedroom. And it is a fairly efficient home as far as the insulation, but we don't have an insulated attic at this point in time or anything like that, so we do have a lot of heat transfer in the summer and heat loss in the wintertime. So with this unit, we ran it pretty much 24/7 in the summer, keeping the temp usually between 67 and 70 degrees, depending on how hot it was outside. And it basically did an excellent job cooling. If we just let it run and not shut it off and turn it on only when we want it to cool, we found that it just kept the room a nice even temperature, and we only saw about an $8 to $10 increase in our electric bill. Now we are using the 220 volt version of this. You can get it in a 110, but obviously it's not going to be as efficient and it's going to use more electrical power to run. So I would recommend getting the 220 version. So I was really happy with that. Only an $8 to $10 increase in our electric bill was awesome, and it kept the room perfectly cool. It did an awesome job. If we did, for whatever reason, shut it off, if we were going away for a long weekend, and we came back and turned it back on, it really could cool the room in about 30 to 40 minutes, which is really impressive considering that this is such a large room, and because it is in the sun all day, it gets extremely hot. So let's now talk about the heating, and this is not our primary source of heat in this bedroom. This home does have forced hot air, burning oil, and we do not have multiple zones for our thermostat. So the main thermostat's on the first floor, this bedroom's on the second floor. So what we found very useful was keeping the temperature of our thermostat a little bit lower at night, and then using this unit to add a little bit of extra heat. So we weren't heating the whole house just to heat the bedroom. We could turn the heat down in our home and just run this at nighttime to get a little bit more warmth on those cold winter nights. With that said, we actually did run out of oil last week, and we have an extremely steep driveway, very difficult to get up, and it had snowed and the oil truck was not able to do a delivery, so we did run out. And I did crank this thing as high as it would go to try to get some heat into this room, because it was about only 55 degrees in the house. And I would say I was pretty underwhelmed with this as far as heating is concerned. So I would not recommend using one of these as a primary heat source unless the room was smaller. or if you got a much bigger BTU unit, more powerful unit. Like I said, this is a 12,000. I think Pioneer makes up to a 30 or 40,000 BTU. So if you were using it as a primary heat source, I would say you probably would want a more powerful unit. And these are rated for down to -10 degrees. So if it's -10 degrees outside, it will still produce heat, but it is extremely inefficient the colder it gets. So I found anything below 15 degrees, this thing really isn't adding a whole lot without doing a ton of work to get there. It just does not put out the same amount of heat. So for cooling, I am extremely impressed with this, but for heating, I definitely would not have it as my primary heat source unless it was a much smaller room or you got a much more powerful unit. As far as the installation is concerned, pretty standard as far as mini splits go. I did have a friend help me put this in that does HVAC. We did have a professional electrician come in and wire it for 220 volts. If you are comfortable doing electric, you can do it on your own, but most states are probably going to legally require a licensed electrician to do it. And in our state, we did have to have a 220 emergency shutoff switch right at the unit, so we did bring in a professional to do that. It was pretty inexpensive, about $150, $200 to have the electrician do that. On our unit, you can actually see that there is some duct tape covering the digital display. The LED on this thing is super bright, and at first I didn't realize that you could actually turn the LED off. The remote that comes with it only has a few buttons, but the panel does slide open and reveals more buttons. So I didn't realize it was an option to shut the LED off, so I just covered it with some tape, and now that it's on there, I kind of just leave it. But these things are really quiet. I haven't noticed any buzzing or really obnoxious humming coming from it. It hasn't disturbed my sleep at all when it's running. You can also see that ours is mounted very close to the ceiling. That's actually not ideal. It's not recommended by Pioneer that you mount it that high, because when it's cooling, what it's doing is it's drawing the hot air in from the ceiling and then blowing cool air out the bottom. And you need room above the unit so you can get a good suction on that air, that hot air at the top of the room. But our room is kind of oddly shaped with these angled walls, and there was no other good place to put this unit, so we had to put it about 3 inches away from the top of the ceiling and the wall there. I believe Pioneer recommends 6 to 8 inches of clearance, but we have had absolutely no problem running this the way it is. And you just want it high enough off the floor. I believe they recommend at least 4 feet off the floor, because again, cold air is going to fall. And so if you're dumping cold air out towards the floor, you're not gonna cool the room as quickly or as efficiently. So I bought this mini split right on Amazon. They had the free shipping, just like pretty much everything else with Prime, and it came relatively quickly. They don't ship these with normal carriers like UPS or FedEx. It came in a freight service, so it did take a little bit longer, and the freight service did call to schedule the delivery. But honestly, it could have probably been shipped with UPS. It's not that big of a box that it comes in. You have the indoor unit and the outdoor unit in 2 separate boxes, but they're really not that big or that heavy. One person can move the boxes around by themselves. And they do not come with any mounting kits, so sometimes people will put the outdoor unit on some cinder blocks outside. I chose in both this unit and the one in my garage to put it on the side of the house, mounted off of the ground, because we do get a lot of snow cover. We do get a few feet of snow here in New Hampshire every year, and I just didn't want the unit to be buried in snow and have to dig it out. So putting it on the house on some mounting brackets was really easy. I also got those on Amazon, and I needed to grab a couple things from Home Depot to mount them, but